We're going to talk about the Slingshot Principle,
Slingshot
which you hadn't heard of before.
No.
From my bloody, little web of metaphors and shit. But where to begin? So the idea of the slingshot is controversial. It's that the best case scenario, that the worst case scenario is actually the best case scenario from a particular perspective, and that's always true. It's a big one. And if I give a personal example, we talked in previous episodes, we're doing this series on mythophalia for anyone who's just jumped along. It's about 12 or 13 episodes, idea by idea. And my real estate experience, right? Not making the millions that I was entitled to.
Sorry.
That
was a bit almost like an offensive laugh.
The universe just didn't pay up.
Yeah.
And just realizing how much I learnt from it is that I actually probably profited more than if it had gone well. Well, the funny thing was there were points when I was more focused on real estate, and I don't have any regrets, but I thought, if this succeeds the way people conventionally think of businesses succeeding, in terms of it makes money and it sort of grows, whatever that means, I found myself thinking, would that actually be better than the way it is right now? Which is a confronting idea.
So if
I had
the
more money,
yep,
more staff. So in real estate, it was hard to make more money without finding a way to put on more and more staff, because you can only sell so much. You only have so much time to drive around to open. So you have to start building a team. And managing people is complex. It's challenging. They've got lives, they have needs, they have changing situations. You have to staff people. You have to make sure people are available, and it's difficult. And I definitely had other interests, as people can clearly see from what I've been doing the last 2 years. I clearly have a lot of other interests that are actually, as I've found out, much simpler. Writing, podcasting, no bullshit conversations about getting to the core of what's the real stuff in life. Retreats, constant student community, finding more of those people and bringing them together, pursuing wisdom. Not a very commercial sounding thing. How do you make money doing that? Just like the pursuit of wisdom, for anyone who's on that journey of seeing why that's rewarding. You can't explain it to someone who's not in that headspace, but it's just on its own. So powerful. The irony is that if I'd gotten everything I wanted, I don't know if it would have been as good. So when COVID began, I had a particular model I was trying to drive, a different real estate model, right? Which was different and was going to be more of a startup-y kind of thing. It was a bigger ambition. And it was good because it was more exciting. And COVID really was challenging because I had to let go the head of sales who'd been working with, who was actually a very close friend at that time. He had a family. He had a young family. So that was like terrifying. I had to do that. And then cut back the costs in the business and abandoned that model, that little vision we had, and the idea to try and improve the real estate industry. In hindsight though, I wasn't too upset. Even at the time I wasn't too upset, because what it felt like was that COVID had given me permission to get to what I really wanted to do now. Instead of growing the business first, delegating it so other people were in control, putting systems in place, blah, 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 which would have been a lot of effort, doing all that to then do or even take time to think about what I really cared about on a deeper level, and then work on that. COVID actually gave me the opportunity to do it immediately. When I was studying university, I did everyone knows who's been deep in the podcast, I did a degree I didn't really want to go to uni. It was a good backup. So that was that. A lot of it was fear driven. The fear of not having something behind me, not having a career path, not having a safety net if my film ambitions didn't pan out. And so I'm attached and intense about finishing this bloody degree. That's a plan B. 4 years invested into it, right? And I got the marks for my honours year, but then I got rejected because I didn't have the minimum subject requirement. So this is a technicality, right? But important to note for the story, I was smart enough. I got the grades.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was furious. I thought this is so it wasn't clear to me that I had to do this extra subject. So I was angry because I wanted to get the degree done and move on. I felt like I'd lost a year of my life. But because I had to wait a whole year to reapply to honours. But what happened was that my friend Nick Abraham came back from Nepal around that time. And I had this whole unplanned year. And then he said, do you want to help me a bit with this from the ground up, the Nepal stuff? And I was like, well, yeah, why not? Like, that'd be sick. I've got a year to do it. That'd be very meaningful. And that, as you know, that changed my life. That was a door. And I wouldn't have been able to open that door, probably, if I was trying to do this honours year. I was terrified of doing it. It's just this big research bullshit. I hated research, but I needed to do it to have the degree. You have to. You don't get a psychology degree if you don't have honours. You have an arts degree majoring in psychology.
Really?
Luke is crunching his eyebrows. Mate, yeah.
So you have to do that?
You have to do honours.
Oh.
In Australia, anyway. So it's terrible. Terrible system. So what I wanted was to finish the honours. What I really wanted was to find something else. So it's the 1,000 doors again. But all these things looked like setbacks at the time. Constant Student, you know that we tried to come up with good revenue. There's a lot of value in Constant Student, but we tried to come up with revenue models that made sense. So we had so many things, because if you're trying to support people, it's very individual. So it was so hard figuring out what can we actually package up and sell that caters to the very wide cross section of this community we want to care for. And, we had like a personal brand course we were launching. We had all these different things. And, and then we kind of failed to sell it. The personal brand, when I spent months working on it, failed to sell it on the webinar we launched. And, when you're selling something, you're trying to sell it, right? You're not trying to just float it in. Often, well, sometimes you are. It's like you've got to put effort in to make something compelling. You're right. It's very hard to half-ass something. Like, you really want to make something compelling, you got to put the effort in to make it look compelling, right? Like a cake. You're just going to put some shit cake together and like expect everyone to eat it. You got to put some sort of care into it. So of course, we run webinars and stuff wanting to sell these things. And then, not many people bought it, or no one bought it actually, sorry. This was earlier this year, I think.
Mm.
Yeah. And I remember complaining to you at the time, like, I just want to do this stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like I need to sell something so we make money.
Yeah.
But I hate everything involved in doing it.
Funny that.
Yeah, funny that. And, you could have put more effort in to figure out, okay, and I did a bit of that. All right, why didn't people buy it? You know what I mean? No one bought it, right? So that night was very depressing. But the next day, this is like if you have more of a growth mindset. The next day I was like, oh, well, I didn't really want to do it.
So if it was a great success, you would have been.
So I was like, if it was a great success, it might eventually,
Sure.
You've got to put up a bit of shit, then it leads to a great outcome and there's more money and stuff. Okay. Not the end of the world. But I was like, oh, maybe we just do this other thing that we want to do now. And we had a different idea for like a marketing agency. That didn't even pan out either. And that was upsetting for a bit. We had all this work, contracts doing. This was just to pay me and Liam a wage, right? And we had all these ideas, and then that didn't really work out either. And then we found that was annoying too. So I've got all these examples, all these what everyone else would call failures. And maybe they are. And depending on what you're after, it would be a failure. But so often, I was just given something that was not what I was initially looking for, but was the thing I really needed. Or the thing I wanted more deeply. And was actually the best case scenario.
Again, funny that.
All right, so I call it the Slingshot Principle, because the idea that if you get, and this is very visual, but some people will be listening, you think of a pebble being pulled back in a slingshot, right? Think of that like a setback. The further you get pulled back, the more power you actually have. The more ability you have to shoot in the other direction, right? It's all stored value. There's multiple examples littered throughout nature. Take empathy. The value of having pain. Say you were abused as a child, right? Say you were, you went broke. Say any of these things. You were rejected in a relationship. It's so hard to relate to people who have gone through those things, if you've never experienced anything to that emotional extreme, empathy is really enabled by people who have had their own challenging experiences. It's hard because you don't see everyone's deep story, but most people who go into psychology, want to be therapists or counselors and stuff like that, have really struggled with something themselves. That's where the drive comes. Because think about it, where would they get the drive if not that? For a lot of people, the stereotype, the image of listening to other people's problems, which is a bad way of phrasing it, is so unappealing. Why would someone want to do that? And what would give them the ability to actually do that? It's so hard to understand. Imagine you'd never been rejected. How hard is it to relate to someone who's been rejected? You're like, don't worry about it. What do you mean? Just get over it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You'll be right.
You'd flip it off. Right? There's so much of struggle. So much of struggle is a gift. Just doesn't look like it at the time. Right? Someone whose things have only worked out for them in business. Charlie Munger. They're the most dangerous people. Right? Charlie Munger is like, they're more scared of success, their own success, than everyone else, him and Warren Buffett. Because you get this hot hand fallacy that everything you do is going to work. Right? And that's very dangerous. Because you don't know. Real success is a complex and 1,000 doors. You don't control all the factors.
Yeah.
You get the illusion of control. It's actually more dangerous. You're building up to a Titanic-like disaster. Other examples of the Slingshot Principle. You know, all those things gave me more perspective, and that perspective was more valuable than the monetary gain of any of those activities. And honestly, right now, you know, I don't have like this financial roadmap, as you know. I'm not without what I need though, which is beautiful, envious. But all these things that had this assumption that had to have a good business model for Constant Student, we don't right now. And what I do at the moment, and it's not perfect, maybe, but I spend a lot of time just talking to people in the community. And because there's no objective or agenda or anything I feel like I need to push them towards, it's as unencumbered as it's ever been. You just talk about it with what's going on. And there's no angle I need to push. We're not looking for these testimonials that we created these entrepreneurs or these writers or these podcasters. Or you can literally just surrender and just look at the person in front of you and going, maybe you don't need to do any bloody business activity ever. Who cares? You know, are you happy in your current line of work? Yeah, kind of. Okay, well, what's wrong with that for now? Play around with something, or whatever's going on for them. You don't have to be wedded to any of these assumptions. That's liberating for me. Might be different for other people. I've just gained so much more. So it comes back to the principle of pain. And as a runner, you might appreciate that this idea or interpretation. Pain is not bad. It's unpleasant. Pain is not evil. It's just not the pleasant experience. And you get this particular learning from pain that's unique, because obviously people don't go seek pain. You can't I want to go get abused so I know what it's like to be abused. Then I can relate to other people who've been abused. Some things don't make sense to intentionally, a lot of pain, apart from working out. And
I was about to say, you've never heard of David Goggins before.
Yeah. Well, so I think I kind of like that guy, but I also think he's a bit of a pain junkie.
He
and
is. I love him.
I feel like, I love him. I think he's a positive force, but I think there's deeper challenges there that
if you've
packaged as
read his
positive.
Book,
yeah, and he's been through shit. So this is the interesting place of the Slingshot Principle. You would never seek these things. They're very 1,000 doors. You could not have seen them coming. But the fact that you experience them, pain, if I burn my finger, pain has a function, right? It's not meant to be bad. It actually saves me. It's like hot water, bad. That's experience. I've now learned, and I can avoid the hot water and help others avoid the hot water and manage the temperature going forward. So all your setbacks are actually gifts, because it's unique learning that others wouldn't seek. Right? You can't learn what I learnt losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate at uni. And you'd never go out saying, I'm going to go lose $100,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars, so I learn a big lesson. You're crazy. I think you're crazy. That was not my intention. But having done that, I've learned things that most people never learn. And everyone else has their own versions of those things. So nothing, it's very hard. This is very confronting but powerful, the slingshot principle. Because anything that happens, nothing is fatal. There might be resistance to that. This is not a everyday idea.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of let's think of the pushback. The pushback being,
I'll give you, don't worry about,
Joe, I've got a family.
Yeah, don't worry about anticipating the pushback. I'll go to the extreme and destroy the objections, potentially. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, I calculated it, spent almost a third of his life in prison.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. In a time of revolt, racism, apartheid, he had a family, right? So all this, like, I've got to provide, all these things that everyone loves to layer on as your life circumstances. I get it. I've not experienced what everyone else has experienced, but I'm going to point to an extreme, because if it's possible for one, it must be possible for more. He came out, with a positive mindset, as far as we can tell, willing to forgive the people who imprisoned him and get proactive about working on these problems in South Africa, right? Now, he didn't get that time back in his life, right? So where's the slingshot? But what is Nelson Mandela's story without that imprisonment, right? His message is not as powerful. And what I think he's a great example of is it transcends even his own life. Now, this is very confronting, because when people think myth of failure, it might be like, how do I get the confidence to talk to girls? How do I, work on an idea I'm passionate about but scared to do, or what people will say? And so you start to overshoot it when you talk about transcending the slingshot principle from your own life. What does that mean? It means that the value of his inverted commas suffering, or the challenge he faced, is actually that he can invest that into the lives of other people. It might not be something within his own experience that he actually got to see the full benefit of. But if you look at yourself as part of this broader thing, bigger than yourself, you can have that. I think an even better example, now I think about it, I always used Mandela, and just tell me if none of this makes sense, is and it's more controversial because it's a religious example, but Jesus. The thing about someone like Jesus, who being crucified brutally, right? 9-tail whip and beatings and spitting and carrying his cross, and then being nailed to it, and saying on that cross straight away, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, which is a De Mello idea, no one sins in awareness. How can I be upset at my mum for, interrupting my Zoom call? How can I get caught up with a family member who tried to take money off me? How can I get caught up with people who tried to imprison me? How can I get upset at the person who's making work difficult for me and let that spoil my life? Or the person who ripped me off, or who promised me something and didn't follow through? How can I live? Because what that guy did, if he's willing to forgive people who've crucified him, not let them off, but forgive in terms of accept, that's a powerful message that is rippling through time still, more than 2,000 years later. It transcends. So being crucified is surely the worst case scenario. Yet he accepted his reality. If you want to look at it in terms of a less metaphysical, the story of Jesus, and you want to be, even if you're not religious or whatever, you're not spiritual, you want to look at it as like a story that he crafted to send a message. He accepted that he would have to die in a brutal way to really get the message across.
It could be a metaphor for the slingshot principle as well.
It is. It is. The worst, he knew that was what, I think he knew. I think it was less of if you want to take a evolved view of the religious thing, it might be less of that he heard this voice, which was his father God, which is like my dad talking to me in my ear, saying, all right, this is what's going to happen next. I think it was religion in the form we talk about. It's like this real intuition to understand, Son of God. It's like the Hindus always thought we are all part of nature, and nature is kind of like what they call God. And that's how he's going to like really send the message, like to love everyone else. Because if I can do it to these people, it takes away a lot of the excuses of others to not do it for lesser. You know what I mean? So I'm very heavy example for very few of us will ever have to implement this principle to that extent. But I argue at this point in time that it's a reality. That it's always the worst case scenario is actually the best case scenario from a particular perspective. Now, it's not going to happen if you're like, life is only good if I have X amount of money. It's not going to be good if, life's only good if I succeed at something, or I get good at something, or I get the recognition somehow one day, or if you get attached to anything in particular. Because when you get attached to any of those things, like, I'll only really be happy if that, I'll only really be content if that, even, providing for you, what does providing for the family mean? Surely it must be holistic, otherwise it's not real providing. And financial is part of that. If you're going to put these conditions on your life that you have, it's very hard to put them on. You're cordoning off reality, I think. You don't really get to demand that. I don't think. I don't think you get to demand that. I'm Joe. I drop wisdom bombs. A lot of people got to know about me one day. Otherwise, what's this all been for? I just don't think it works that way.
Otherwise, if it doesn't happen, you'll be miserable.
Yeah, but how powerful is it? I'm surrounded by people, and this is the funny thing, right? I'm surrounded by people like you, and a handful of others, well, not just a handful, actually, plenty of others, who just really appreciate the value and the role I play in their lives. And I have had a lot of people, even some of people commenting on YouTube videos and stuff, which is very lovely, right? Say, oh, you deserve a bigger, all that stuff.
I tend to agree, definitely.
A lot of people. Well, I don't. I'll tell you why. And a lot of people get that stuff too, right? It's not just me.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
How slingshot is it if I never get broad appreciation? If I'm not a household name or anything like that. How slingshot is it if I were to do this anyway? That's the best case scenario. You know what I mean? Because that's more powerful than someone who does get the recognition, continues doing it. Because it's like, oh, they get recognition. That's wonderful. Right? Like, but I do get recognition. I already do. And ironically, I get recognition from the people whose recognition matters most. Why should the recognition of strangers matter more than the people I already know in my life now? Or the people that have found me so far? What more do I really want? No, but I deserve it. I'm owed it.
The content.
But there's nothing more powerful than someone who, doing what we're doing now. People who do it without ever getting. I don't even know what it means. What does recognition mean? What does it mean? Now you lower the bar of success. You lower the bar of failure. That example of Jesus, did he get recognition? A bit. He was also fucking nailed to a cross. Nelson Mandela, 28 years or whatever it was in prison. But he refused to let them imprison his mind and soul. And that's that poem, that Invictus, I am I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul, or whatever the lines are. They imprisoned him physically, but they couldn't imprison him in the other ways, in the ways that really matter.
The Stoics talk a lot about that.
Stoics talk about that. And, that slingshot principle is powerful. I have all these things over the last 10 years where people would say, that's too bad, you fell off the horse, with things that happen, failing to make the big money in real estate, having to let's start COVID, not being able to sell this, not growing the following in 2 years, whatever that means, in 2 years, You know what I mean? This course, that course, you know? Constant student. I had someone tell me, it's a shame the constant student didn't find, product market fit, didn't really get that. And I was like, that's such a funny statement. I go, it's in its form right now.
Product market.
It's been incredible.
Yeah.
It's been incredible.
Mm.
I'm not trying to just cordon things off. I'm not trying to be dismissive when I say these things. That I'm not trying to be like, oh, no. I've done really good, even though it was piss weak effort, really. I'm not trying to play that game. What I really think is the value system is so off reality with how we measure successful.
Mm.
And it's so limited. It can only be good if it does value and it makes money. You know what I mean? You can only be successful if you've got some sort of big recognition or lots of money.
Well,
good
example.
Really,
But running coaching, right?
Yeah.
You can coach 5 people, charge $50 a month. You're not a massive success, but
yeah.
What do you? You're not a massive success financially,
but you are a
imagine
massive success.
You're impacting the impact you could potentially have to 5 people's life and the flow-on effects and all that. So
yeah, so very interesting, right? And see, people have this. It's a real kickback because you can't just. Someone's like, I've had this disaster. I lost my job, and you just sit there and go, oh, don't worry, Slingshot Principle.
Yeah.
Good luck. Bye now.
Yeah. The worst case. Yeah. Saying. Yeah. Worst case scenario.
Really good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
That's fantastic.
But honestly, once the dust settles, once the storm clears, so I don't lead with Slingshot, right? You got to allow experiences to experience. The pain is there to be felt, but it's not there to be dwelled on.
No.
Okay. Pain is not there to be dwelled on. It's there to send you a signal. You're meant to interpret that and then fucking move on. And the moving on is what seizes the pain. In truth, that's accurate, healthy pain. So if someone comes to me with a challenge or a desire, or even if I have my own challenge or something, I enable the feeling of negative, whatever. I don't try to shut it off. People think Stoics is non-emotional. It's not. It's non-attached.
Logic.
Yeah. You still feel things.
Yep.
But you don't dwell on them. They don't derail you. And then I quickly move into the Slingshot after that. Because really, losing your job is Slingshot. It's impossible for it not to be. For a lot of people, it's part of the story, I lost my job, I was depressed, but then I realized, I'm just going to do this, fuck it. It was the COVID stories of people who had to change careers or figure this out, and they started a podcast, or they started this, or they started that, and that's what they really enjoy doing now. The best education system is probably 4-week lockdown once a year.
Yeah.
Because that's what pushed a lot of people to what they really want to do. And then they started learning experientially. It's not pretty though, but it's not pretty because of the mindset we carry. Because we like the stability. Hey, I like stability too. But there's a point to where it becomes detrimental as well. And, I feel like we are too all in. I think majority of modern working life is too all in because it does create this dependency on the job. You know what I mean? You are that, your livelihood and family life will often be, hitched to that job. And, it's just a delicate thing, but
I'm sure we'll talk about those ideas in terms of fragility and anti-fragility.
Exactly.
But I mean, yeah, if you, anything I've sort of observed in my own life that's been a massive negative at the time, has definitely, with a few months passing, turned into a positive.
Exactly.
And I think the experience is pretty similar for a lot of people.
Yes.
Very similar. There's just those moments.
There's those moments, but then this is the opportunity cost of not living in awareness, which is a very fucking lame thing to say. Did that sentence just come out of my mouth? But the problem is you can't remember that when you're in the normal cycle of what we call living. Now, I'm quite different because half the time, most of the time it's doing things like this.
Sure.
And writing in that and putting that stuff into lessons and communicating it. And so, you know how many times I've told the stories I've told today? Most people not doing that. So for me, it's bloody top of mind. So that's why I'll try to sell something one night, be fucking devastated that no one bought it, thinking I'm no good, fixed mindset, blah, blah, blah. I'm never going to be anything. I should figure something else out. Blah, blah. And then next day being like, I've moved beyond that. That's actually probably positive, actually. Like, fuck, I didn't really want to do that. And if you want to continue with it, so say the course example, right? This is why it's bulletproof for me. If that thing is really worth doing, if it's really worth doing, you will still want to do it. You'll have sufficient motivation to just process the failure, inability to sell, into informing the product. Okay, so-and-so. Talk to the people who came last night. Why didn't you buy it? Oh, timing. Okay, other persons. All right. Oh, they're all saying this, but I think what they really mean is this. All right. How about I lower the price? How about I raise the price, but make it a tighter group of people? How about I do the first one for free just so I can get the testimonials? Because the problem is they just don't, it sounds good, but they don't believe enough in it yet to invest the money. You got all these levers you can pull. You'll figure it out if you really want to, though.
Yeah.
And you see clearly. So even if something's worth doing, it's not like not selling or whatever it is, or not getting the job is enough to deter you. Right? The motivation will be there. You just got to listen to yourself. Or you might need time to reflect. But in other cases, it's like, oh, I feel like I'm not even meant to do that. I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go through a new door. So it's slingshot in either direction. Whether you can persist or whether you vary. Whether you pivot or whether you just completely stop. Like that's me, the mode I'm right in, for anyone who's not up to date with my journey, I've stopped almost everything. I'm refusing to do the podcast on a weekly basis now. We're recording this in batch and I'm going to schedule them. I've realized the value of virtually doing so little of what I had planned to do. I've abandoned most of it. For now, I don't know, but this is crazy. Anyway, so that's the slingshot principle. Yeah,
that's a big one.
And now you start to see why failure, to me, is a myth.
Yeah,
because anything bad that could happen is actually something good in disguise.